Hi, I'm Alex Newman. I'm a foreign correspondent with the New American Magazine, and one of the topics I cover most often is the United Nations. I call it the Dictators Club, a cesspool of corruption, one of the real swamps that needs to be drained. Right? And today I want to talk to you about UN whistleblowers. There is so much corruption and crime and horrors going on in the United Nations, and unfortunately, because the United Nations and its officers and its agents are immune from national and local laws, right? They claim a diplomatic immunity. So much of this they get away with. That they operate with impunity. And when I talk about crimes, I don't mean just your regular run-of-the-mill crimes, robberies, and that sort of thing. I'm talking about widespread rape of children, for example. So let's start with Anders Kompass. He was a Swedish whistleblower. He worked at the UN Office of Human Rights, and he found out that international peace troops were in the Central African Republic raping little children, some as young as 9 years old. And he realized that something was wrong, right? Like any normal person would realize that this has got to stop. And so he decided to try to protect the children. He made people aware within the United Nations. Nothing was done. So finally he passed the information on to the French government so they could start some prosecutions and protect the children. And rather than giving him a medal and saying, "Good job, Mr. Kompass, that's exactly what you should have done, you got to protect the kids," they terrorized him. They sent armed guards to his office and escorted him out. They ruined his reputation, or they tried to at least. They demonized him, they ridiculed him, they investigated him, they tried to get rid of him. And all this because he did the right thing. He blew the whistle on the rape of children by international peace troops. And of course, this is not a new problem, right? If you go back in the UN's history, this is a systematic problem. In one town in the Ivory Coast, the Save the Children did a survey. They found out that 8 out of 10 underage girls admitted to being regularly sexually molested and raped by United Nations peace troops. They call them peacekeeping troops, and one of the most Orwellian uses of language that I can think of. And so this is a regular problem, and really the way that we have found out about these things is thanks to the hard work of whistleblowers. So we really need to be protecting these whistleblowers, but unfortunately that's not what's happening. Anders Kompass ended up resigning in disgust. He said that there's no ethics. He doesn't think ethics can come back to the United Nations. He was just outraged. All the people who were responsible for this are still running around. The people who went after him, they had a secret meeting in Turin, Italy. This came out later in leaked emails, and plotted on how to destroy him. So this is how the UN treats whistleblowers. Then there's a whole bunch of these people, right? Most recently we had Reilly from Ireland. She found out that somebody in the UN Human Rights Office was passing the names of Chinese dissidents to the mass murdering dictatorship enslaving the people of China. And so you would think that the head of the UN office, who was made aware of this, would say, "Oh my goodness, that's terrible. Let's find out how this is happening so we can stop it immediately because we're putting people's lives in danger." But that would be the proper thing to do, and so we know that that's not what the United Nations did. What they did instead was they terrorized and persecuted the whistleblower who tried to stop all this. So finally she went to the Irish government, and the Irish government raised the issue and they put a stop to it. That was, of course, after one of these people who had been identified to the Chinese government was detained on their way to Geneva to testify at the UN Human Rights Council. They were detained and then they died in detention. A number of others were also detained before they were able to come expose the crimes of the Chinese dictatorship. So the Irish government finally had to intervene, and the UN again went after the whistleblower, Reilly. And these are just the two most recent examples, but there's so many of these. In this issue of the magazine here, this is the January 2017 issue, we've actually got a number of stories on whistleblowers. We have a book review, a book written by Rasna Warah. She's a Kenyan, and she blew the whistle on a bunch of crazy stuff that was happening in the United Nations. She said they were just making up numbers, taking money from governments and doing all kinds of stuff, embezzling money. So she had a lot of revelations, and of course she was humiliated and retaliated against for trying to blow the whistle on these things. Then we go back in history a little bit. We've got another article here, The Forgotten Story of a Heroic UN Officer's Murder. And unfortunately, this man has been almost forgotten by official history, but he really should be better known. He was a Danish diplomat, Bang-Jensen was his name, Povl Bang-Jensen. And he blew the whistle on Soviet infiltration of the United Nations. He was working on a UN commission investigating Soviet atrocities in Hungary. When he did that, he had promised the witnesses to these atrocities that he would keep their names secret, because everybody knew that the UN Secretariat was filled with Soviet agents, with spies, and so he promised these witnesses, no, I'm not going to tell anyone your names, and he got permission from the highest levels to do that, because everybody knew that if the names of these people got out, the families, the friends in Hungary would be murdered, would be tortured, would be abused, and so, you know, this was the proper thing to do. So long story short, he committed suicide in you know, one of the most ridiculous examples of murder portrayed as a suicide that I've ever encountered, and you know, there are some of these that happen, but I encourage you to read this article. This man needs to be remembered, and I call him the original UN whistleblower, right? He did the right thing, he was a hero, and he paid probably the ultimate price for this. You know, they ruled it a suicide, although the evidence very, very strongly suggests it was a murder. So please check this out. We really need to protect the whistleblowers. Congress has taken some action to try to ensure that whistleblowers are protected in the United Nations, but unfortunately the United Nations continues these ridiculous policies. Even their new whistleblower policy is a total joke. Rasna Warah has talked about this. So check out the New American, check out these stories, try to pick up a copy of this issue of the magazine, and you know, we got to do what we can, because the whistleblowers are the only source of information we have on all these atrocities and these crimes that are being perpetrated by the upper levels of the UN.